Welcome to the Epiphany series. My name is Peter Sanderson, aka the Preston Poet, and today we're going to be speaking to someone really special, someone who, in my eyes, is one of the world's leading astrologers. Welcome, Pam Gregory.
Thank you. Delighted to be with you, Peter.
It's an amazing to have you here. I've been wanting to interview you for so long. For those of you who don't know Pam, Pam is a published author. She's an incredibly gifted astrologer. She's a following of 86,000 people on YouTube and counting, which is quite incredible. One of the books that she wrote, having read it back since COVID-19, it's quite incredible to see how she predicted everything was going to happen. I've had the honour of reading two of her books. I think you've only got two books, Pam, is that right? Or is there a third that I don't know about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not that I'm planning.
Okay. Well, the one that I really enjoyed because it kind of opened my eyes to the power of astrology was you don't really believe in astrology, do you? And for me, I wouldn't say it changed my life, but it certainly added a whole new dynamic to it. The thing that changed my life was actually my conversation with Pam earlier this year, and that's why I really wanted to do this interview. Pam, it's an honour to have you as a guest on the show. Is there anything you'd like to say before we begin the interview in earnest?
Just that I've had to slightly change my position because I get better reception at this angle.
Okay.
And I thank you for that wonderful introduction. Blown away. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. I only speak the truth. So, firstly, Pam, how did you initially get into astrology?
Yes, I stumbled into it, thank goodness. After university, I'd emigrated to Toronto. I joined a yoga class in the first week, and there was a guy there that somebody else who was going to the yoga class said, he's an astrologer. Wonderful black guy called Aster, which is quite funny because in Latin that means star. So I went up to him at the end of the class and I said, look, I know nothing about astrology, but I'd love you to do my chart. And I went to see him a week later, and I spent 7 hours with him. And I can remember as if it was yesterday, sitting in his tiny, tiny flat in Toronto, and the world was just splitting open to reveal this whole dimension of me, this whole world of meaning that I'd been completely unaware of up to that point. And that was the beginning of my very long and continuing forever lifetime journey with astrology. But one of the interesting thing was he recorded on tape at that point. This is a long time ago. He recorded the session on tape, and in a house move I lost the tape. But after spending 5 years in Toronto, the winters got to me and I was coming back to the UK, and I was actually packing up the flat and I came across the tape again. So I was playing it as I was packing boxes, and it said, September the 4th, 1979 will be a major turning point in your life. And that day was September the 4th, 1979. So that was the day I was leaving Canada. And he then said October the 30th that year will be a significant high in my life. And on that date, I was sitting at 19,000 feet in the Himalayas. Wow. So it was a very literal high. So from that point on, it was just compulsive. And through the last 45 years, I haven't really stopped. I did have a normal day job for 35 years, but astrology has always been a passion in my life.
Yeah. I mean, from what you know now, you must realize that wasn't a coincidence that you read that on the day that you were having the epic change in your life.
Yes, I mean, it gets quite funny because the synchronicities and, the literal symbolism and how it plays out. I mean, you've just got to laugh sometimes because you feel as if you're sort of in the magic zone with secret information, so it's really fun as much as anything else.
Wow. Well, what do you think is the most important thing that a human being can learn from astrology? I mean, you've mentioned in your books how it can become a map to our lives. But I mean, is there one thing, if you could sit someone down and say, what do you think is the most important thing we can garner from it?
Yeah, I think I'd say, I could talk for a day about the many benefits, but I think two of the really big things I would say are really understanding how interconnected we are with the cosmos. We are made of stardust. We are literally made of stardust. So it isn't that we're separate from nature, that we dominate and exploit nature. We are completely intertwined with it. And the greater our recognition of that, the better our future is going to be going forwards, because that's part of this whole pivot point of transformation. But the other thing I'd also say is astrology can teach you to be the best you can be in any moment. It teaches you how to maximize your potential with whatever is unfolding archetypally for you in that moment. And you've now got the map. You know, I refer to it as a sheet of music. So you now understand your sheet of music, and it's up to us how we play it. And something I've said all the way through my work is that the chart gives you your pattern, it doesn't give you your level. You've now got the sheet of music and you play it with a couple of tin spoons of the London Philharmonic. You can have a little life or a big life. That's the bit that's down to us. That's where we have our latitude in terms of the level of consciousness. So I think there's two big things about be the best you can be in any moment, but recognizing how interwoven we are with the universe. Those are two really big things, and a lot of other benefits behind that.
Yeah, when you say you've got a different level potentially, how can you guarantee that level is at the highest possible path, or is that another of the mystical things that we have to find out as well?
I think it is, and it's really down to your own discipline. You know, it's very interesting. I've now been doing this so long, very commonly I've seen two charts that are quite similar between people. They're born roughly the same time, the same geography, etc. And it is amazing how their lives go in parallel. They marry at the same time, they have children at the same time, father dies at the same time. But one of them may have had a much more dedicated spiritual search, perhaps, and spiritual practice. And they may be living their chart out at a very different level of perspective and understanding. Now, that is no judgment from me. It's just their journey. You know, they're on a different phase in their journey, so there's no judgment involved. But it's fascinating to see that the chart is not fated in that way. I mean, if you look at Hitler's chart, he had a jolly nice chart. You know, his ascendant and sun sign are both ruled by Venus, planet of love. Wow. So clearly there was a frequency problem and perhaps a karmic past life problem, but he had a jolly nice chart to begin with.
Wow.
So the frequency side of it is so vital in how we play our music. So the greater our level of understanding and awareness and consciousness, the bigger that birth chart becomes for us, and it becomes eventually magnificent for us to guide us.
Well, after you did my chart, we'll talk a little bit about that later. I must admit, I have moments in my life when I go, so I have to play this out as highly as I can because Pam said so.
Sorry, taskmaster.
Thanks for that. That's what I think. But what should I do? And I think, is it that I need to meditate more? Is it? But I think you answered it there by saying that the level of consciousness that we choose to live at, and that ultimately is, you know, living in our truth and walking our truth, speaking our truth, and I guess meditating, but not becoming consumed by the need to constantly higher our level, because otherwise that becomes a bigger story than actually living your life, which is not the way it's meant to be, I guess.
Absolutely. And I think it's really just about living from the heart.
Right.
Just living from the heart, and everything you do kind of check back into the heart. Living from love, living with kindness, living with compassion. And those are kind of quite simple principles. And I know life gets incredibly complex on the outside, and particularly at the moment this year, but if we just keep living life from the inside out rather than the outside in, because particularly this year, which is very challenging, if you're living it from the outside in, you're just kind of the rubber hitting the road, you know, the kicks and knocks of, you know, you look at the news and your frequency goes down. You know, I haven't turned on a television in many months. So it's living from the inside out with love, compassion and kindness, and that will be your guide really in every moment.
Yeah. The irony is here, though, that sometimes life doesn't tell you to do that, does it? Because if I'm just speaking about conversations I might have had with my boss, you know, with my mother, you know, who's not very well, you know, I'm often getting told by other people to go the other way, you know, so you shouldn't be doing that, because I'm coming from here, my heart, and because to me my heart says do this, but my mind and the other people are saying no, you should do this because that's the way you were brought up, young man.
I think you have to trust your own inner guidance. We're all unique individuals, and you just have to check in. And I often use a pendulum.
Right.
You know, if I'm not completely sure, I'll use a pendulum or my dowsing rods, and they kind of extend or expand my intuition.
Sure.
And that's getting very, very reliable now. So I will trust that because it's still my own internal guidance.
Yeah.
It just becomes more obvious with the pendulum or the dowsing rods.
Wow. Okay, so everyone buy a pendulum.
And it's so simple, you know, it's such a simple thing to do, you know, show me yes, show me no, is this good for me, is it, you know, da, da, da. So that is so elementary, and we can use that all through our lives. If you don't feel you're getting a loud enough voice in your intuition, ask your dreams. Almost every night as I fall asleep, I'll ask my dreams for an answer. Show me the answer to A, B, and C. Show me the next step, you know, what's in my highest good. And it's amazing how often you get really quite surprising answers coming through.
Wow. Well, thank you for that. That's a great tip. So here's a big question, something I've been wondering for a while, especially since reading your books. Now, astrology used to be one of the key sources of information for so many leaders in the past. Why did it fall so far out of favor?
Very interesting question. Great question, actually. I mean, astrology, just as background, as you know, Peter, is 6,000 years old. It started in ancient Mesopotamia, sadly now modern day Syria. And because people were living there very open to the skies, they didn't have cinema, computers, they used to tell each other stories about the gods that lived on the planets, and they developed stories that became myths. And those myths are the same myths I use today in the archetypes every day in people's birth charts. So you know, it's just amazing, isn't it? 6,000 years old. And so astrology developed all the way through society, really. It became part of medicine. You couldn't practice as a doctor in the Middle Ages without understanding the four humours and astrology. It was intertwined completely with the mystery schools. It was one of the foundational subjects for enlightenment. It was also always part of university curriculum with theology, etc. And across really till the 1600s, in every royal court in Europe, an astrologer was part of their decision-making team. Even in the papacy, they had astrologers. So, you know, it was a really revered subject. It was academic. People of higher learning, people of higher qualifications had to understand astrology to operate in life. And the real crunch time came really with, because astronomy was completely intertwined with astrology. You couldn't be an astrologer without being an astronomer. The subjects were completely together. Excuse me. So, and it was really when Copernicus and then Galileo developed their heliocentric theories that the Earth was no longer the center of the universe, but the sun was, and the Earth moved around the sun. And the Catholic Church were horrified because this went against all church teachings of the Earth is at the center of God's design, God's plan. And you cannot say the Earth moves and is subservient to the sun. That's an outrage. So everything, the baby was thrown out with the bathwater. Astrology was thrown out with astronomy and heliocentric theory at that time. And then really we moved into the age of reason with Isaac Newton, and everything had to be measured and proved. And because you couldn't prove astrology, there's no push and pull and gravitational force that makes it work, it was just dismissed as superstition, and it became kind of almost, you know, gypsy tea leaves that, you know, to the much lower levels of society in terms of learning and understanding. And it's really only very recently with Jung, Krishnamurti, Gurdjieff, Jung, it started to resurrect as a kind of psychological astrology.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's coming back into understanding.
Well, I was just going to say that to you. Do you think that now that people are starting to open their eyes, consciousness is rising, at least certainly in the circles that I'm walking in? Do you believe that it's going to play a big part in our future?
Absolutely. I mean, not only because people need a lot of guidance now, but as the outer planets move much more into Aquarius, that's the sign of astrology. It's ruled by Uranus. So I think astrology will become more and more prominent in our culture again, in our society, and will be much more respected again, I think. And that really is my wish.
Yeah.
You know, it isn't, and that's why I will never do sun sign astrology. You know, you will never hear me mention sun sign astrology, you know, because it kind of reduces all the symphonies of Bach and Beethoven to an advertising jingle.
Yeah.
You know, it is so much more than that, and that's what we've got to get back to understand, its vastness and its depth.
Yeah, and in some ways, it's these sun signs that have taken the respect away from this industry, really. Because I remember reading, I'm a Capricorn, born January the 6th, but I remember reading my Capricorn sign and thinking, this just isn't me. You know, it said, oh, you're so financial based, blah blah blah, and so materialistic. And I was thinking, hold on, you know, this makes no sense whatsoever. But then, you know, when you start to realize that you have an ascending sign, and suddenly that whole map of your star chart is just incredible, where you suddenly realize there's so much more to it, and every single day is kind of guided by planets, stars, and astrology.
It's amazing, because that's why it takes me about 6 hours to prepare for each chart, because there are about 3,000 variables in every chart, and midpoints and harmonics, and there's so many layers to it. So, you know, I never want to get into mass production where I'm just, you know, chucking the consultations out. You know, I really want to help people in depth, even though they're many fewer people I can help that way, simply because of time capacity. But you've got to honor the chart, you've got to honor the sacred space you share with that person. Yeah, and the subject, I think.
Well, you certainly opened my eyes and helped me, so thank you for that.
Oh.
Now, astrologers have been talking about 2020 for a long time. How, in your eyes, has this year matched up to those predictions?
Well, spot on so far, but we've still got a long way to go. Yeah. So, you know, the conjunction of Saturn and Pluto at the beginning of the 12th of January, we hadn't had that conjunction for 500 years. And the last time we had that conjunction in Capricorn was in 1517, 1518. So if we go back to what was happening then, that's when Martin Luther, because of the too much power of the church, the abuse of power of the Catholic Church, really got to him. So he was really a radical and a revolutionary. So he nailed his 95 Theses to the doors of the Wittenberg Church to challenge the power of the church. And that ultimately began the Reformation and significantly reduced the power of the church in society, because the church was everything then. So we knew we were going to get a repeat of that. About one of the big themes is about abuse of power. Another theme is about containment as well, control and contraction. So we knew that, but the power in society today is no longer really the church, it's our governments, our leaders. And in Capricorn, it's very much a top-down vertical structure, you know, the elite that really favor inequality, because they want to keep on with their elitism and their wealth and da-da-da. So it's a very top-down structure of governments and leaders telling us what to do, what we can't do. It's also things like corporations and institutions. And in my very long monthly newsletters, I'm seeing how other establishment parts of society, like even our royal family, are being significantly challenged. So we knew it was going to be about more control, more power from the top. We didn't quite know how that was going to happen. But we also knew that the whole process this year is, firstly, the deconstruction of the old order by it becoming apparent that leaders and governments have not fully acted with accountability, with transparency, with wisdom, you know, with right spiritual action. And the more that emerges, the more their authority erodes. And we can see right across the world, you know, governments aren't working, it's dysfunctional, people are taken to the streets. That Eris Square, Pluto is writ large out there, US, Hong Kong. So we knew there'd be a kind of collapse of that, which is very uncomfortable, because that's formed the structure of everything we've known in our lives. You know, we've grown up with governments that were supposed to be paternalistic and look after us. And all of a sudden, disclosure about what's really going on, and, you know, lots of stuff about our leaders who we should have as our elected servants, are making us question that. So, you know, that's the collapse of the old. And it's almost like, if you're going to put in a new kitchen, you don't put in your new units on top of the old ones. You've got to tear out all of the old units completely before you can fit the new ones. So this is the process we're in, and it's almost like an incubation chrysalis period because of the lockdown as well. But what we're going to emerge into, if we manifest well, and it's down to every single one of us, we're not stepping into a film set, but the promise is a whole new worldview, which is much more humanitarian, much more equitable, much more compassion, much more horizontal as opposed to vertical as we get into December, into next year, and really over the next few years. It's not all going to be sorted in December by a long way, but we start a different period with a little less density, a little less contraction. And it will take another few years, I think, till about 23, 24. But we're in that process of deconstruction. So whether it's what's true, what's not, this shifting truth about can we believe and why should we believe anyway, plus the riots on the street, which I think will get much more intense in the second half. All of that is happening too. So very strong outer events. So just keep going inwards. Yeah. You can't fix all those problems through logic. So just go inwards and create, because that's where the creation happens. And we have to get to an altered state, quite a high level of being through meditation or contemplation to manifest effectively. If we're just kind of angry and fearful, we're going to make a lousy job of manifesting because we're just going to get more of that. But the second half of 2020 is more dynamic than the first. So this is going to test our mastery. We've got to walk our talk. If we've had a spiritual practice for a long time, it's going to really be tested. Okay, put that into practice on a day-to-day basis now. So it's making us up our game in our spiritual practice, if that makes sense.
And you mean on an individual and a global level here?
Sorry, say again, Peter?
You're talking on an individual and on a global level here.
Correct. And the more of us that can do that, the more we'll change the momentum of the collective, because there's always a downward causation from people at a high level of frequency that kind of influences the lower levels. So it isn't that you need 52% of the world's population to be at a higher level. You actually, this is getting into chaos theory with physics as well. You only need about 1%. Wow. And that brings much more coherence into the whole. So even if you get 1% of the global population, I think we've probably exceeded that now anyway, you affect the whole to become much more coherent.
Wow. So all these spiritual communities that have been growing in the last 3 months are going to really thrive and help the rest of the people who are perhaps slightly less conscious.
Absolutely. And I think eventually everybody will wake up, at different times, different stages, depending on their journey. But the more, the faster we can wake up, the better, because we'll get to that end point more quickly and move out of this chrysalis phase.
Wow. And right now, we're obviously in a spell where there's 3 eclipses in the space of 5 weeks. I mean, I don't know when the last time that was. I'm sure you could probably tell me. But even just walking around and speaking to people, I can feel that something extra is going on. There's a bit of anger in the air from certain people. Some people are really being challenged right now. What would you recommend we do in this time when we have this big tug of war between the heart and the mind?
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. And the intensity is really strong. It always is at eclipse time, but, you've got a whole bunch of stuff happening in the second half, which will bring up intensity as well. We've got 6 eclipses this year, as you know, rather than the normal 4. So it's a big, big pivotal year. So the head and the heart is really, really important. I'm glad you asked that, because with more planets moving into Aquarius, that's head. That's rationality, that's intellect, that's cool, that's detached, it's not huggy, it's not warm. We've got the North Node now in Gemini, another air sign. It's all about the mind. Give me more information, give me so much information, I don't know what to believe. And, I'm kind of all over the place because it's knocked out my old belief system because, I'm getting new information all the time. So it's very heady. Yeah. And we can spin in our heads. But we have to keep bringing ourselves back, minimum once a day, but ideally more often, to live in the heart. Because if we do that, then as we're moving into a greater sense of becoming a galactic citizen, the focal point between the head and the heart becomes this third eye. And for many people, this third eye is becoming more and more activated. And this will be I almost see this growing like, Pinocchio's nose, like a probe, but, this will become our communication device. We'll become more telepathic. We'll be able to start to either see, hear, or feel other benevolent races. I mean, many people I know, but many friends channel other beings, benevolent beings who are here trying to help us right now. Because this shift that we're going through isn't just affecting the Earth, it's affecting our entire galaxy. So it's those other races, those other extraterrestrial beings who are affected as well. So it isn't just Earth, and that's why they're becoming more involved. And for a while, the Earth was kind of offline, as it were, but now we're much more connected back into the galaxy. And that's affecting the energy lines on the Earth, and that's affecting us physically. There's a whole circuit to this. So I always give you very long answers to very simple questions, but if we can focus, if we can focus on this in our meditation, if we can turn our closed eyes up to this point, start to see fireworks and lights, and we're starting to activate that, and that becomes our focal point. So it balances the head and the heart.
Okay. I must admit, you've discussed before how Earth is moving out of a certain sphere at the moment into a new consciousness, but physically the planet is actually moving into a new kind of stratosphere. Is that right?
Absolutely. It's our whole solar system, for all of our lifetimes and for many thousands of years, as far as we know, it's been spinning. The whole solar system has been spinning in this area, which is known as the magnetic cloud, which has been like a cotton wool. It's been like a buffer between the solar system and greater cosmic and galactic energies. But now we've kind of dropped out of that magnetic cloud, and we're much more open. It's all, it's almost like the clouds have cleared in the sky on a sunny day, and no clouds. So all of this new cosmic and galactic energy is coming onto the Earth plane that we have never known in our entire lifetime. And so that is part of the activation to a higher consciousness, but it's also activating the energy lines on the Earth, which you can dowse and find. And they are all expanding and strengthening all the time because of this greater interaction with cosmic and galactic energy. So that in turn is affecting us physically.
So it's a good thing. So,
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. We're going to have leaps. It's not going to be gradual. It's not going to be linear. We're going to have leaps of insight and an awakening and perspective. And that's going to keep on happening all year, which is fabulous. Bring it on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for that very clear explanation. Amazing. So without meaning to be too negative, is there any indication that there might be a second wave of COVID-19? Or is everyone asking you this right now, and are you sick of answering this question?
Well, it's certainly possible, because I spoke about that very powerful conjunction between Saturn and Pluto at the beginning of the year. That was like striking a tuning fork, and it colours the whole of this year. Now that conjunction was at 22 of Capricorn. Mars has just right at the end of June, 28th of June, will be moving into its warrior own sign of Aries. And normally it stays in a sign for 6 weeks. It'll be staying for 6 months because it's retrograding as well. It's going back and forwards, back and forwards, back and forwards. When it's retrograde, it's closer to the Earth. So it's super strong because it's in its own sign, super strong because it stays there 6 months, super strong because it's closer to the Earth. But what it's also doing is retracking, reactivating all of that Saturn-Pluto stuff that was happening in January over and over again. It's also coming together with Eris, who's kicking off on the streets, eruptions. So the second half of the year is going to be stronger than the first. So whether it's another I strongly suspect it's a greater sense of containment, because Mars is going to reactivate whatever was starting to happen in January, and that was clearly the virus, wasn't it? January was starting to become aware of the cases, and then the lockdown happened 23rd of, well, it happened here, it was all around 22nd, 23rd of March, which is exactly when Saturn went into Aquarius. Aquarius, the sign of freedom, Saturn, restriction on freedom. Bingo, it was absolutely to the day. So my sense is that there could well be another lockdown, whether it's a resurgence of COVID or a mutation of COVID or a different virus, or there could even be some outer event that comes in that's very big and surprising. And for that reason, we have to be constrained and locked down, and that will have financial, economic hits. It's have mental health hits. It'll have, I think there are going to be issues on food distribution supplies is what I want to say. Food distribution supplies. So the more you can grow your own food, find a local farmer's market, that kind of thing, because I think food supplies are going to be disrupted as well. So for whatever the reason, it's a strong second half, but the purpose of it is to really, really wake up those people who are not yet woken.
Yeah, because you do get this as COVID-19, I'm not saying it's coming to an end, because obviously it's still very prevalent in the world, but you do get the feeling, living in France and certainly going over to the border to Switzerland, they're just walking around as if nothing ever happened. And it's quite phenomenal to see, and really heartbreaking in some ways. It's nice to see people together, but people abusing the rules. And this isn't me accusing Switzerland of being bad or the Swiss at all. But it's more of guys, do you not remember what was going on about a month ago? And it's still going on in Mexico and Brazil in a huge way, and in the UK. Because what you don't want is, people to be irresponsible. I'm trying to be spiritual and not have any fear, but at the same time, I want people to be responsible. And sometimes I feel that there's a few people out there, quite a lot of the young people, who are being quite irresponsible right now.
Yeah. So it has purpose. It isn't just, jolly bad luck. Its purpose spiritually is to wake up more of the people who haven't fully awoken. And that's when we start to get our big breakthroughs with the big shifts in consciousness. I mean, it's happening with many, many, many people across the world, but it's going to start to happen with more people.
Wow. Well, I get the feeling it might come in a different way, the way you're saying it as well, because the universe is just so unpredictable. It'd just be too easy to have a second wave of COVID-19, wouldn't it?
It would, and kind of, done that already. But yes, and it may even be something more galactic, I'm sensing, and I can't really sort of take it any further than that, but I think it could be something galactic which has been very unknown to us, and eek, could that be scary for some of us? And is that true or is that not? So there are many, many layers to this, but the purpose of it is spiritual transformation and the shift in consciousness.
Okay, well, let's speak to each other in a year's time and discuss that one. We'll be laughing at this conversation, I'm sure. So I'll take my kind of very human hat off now, and I wanted to talk about something you mentioned in one of your YouTube updates about the fall of the financial system and this world of hierarchy. And you've already touched on it a little bit already, but as a society, if you could get in a room with Donald Trump and all these wonderful leaders of ours, what would you say to them right now? How can we prepare as a race, as a human species, for what's about to happen?
Well, I think if I was in any kind of leadership position like that, which I really wouldn't want, I think it's a hell of a job, I'd be working very hard to reduce elitism and make societies much more equitable. Because the reason that people are rebelling so much is because they're not being heard, they're not being seen. They have this great sense of, poverty and inequality. And that's right. People are, in desperate circumstances. And in the States, racism has never gone away. In my newsletter today, I've been writing about how, we're getting astrological resurgence of going right back to the American Civil War, which was partly about slavery. And although slavery was stopped with the 13th Amendment in 1865, racism wasn't stopped. So, if I was king for the day, I'd be trying to get much more equality into society for all people, financially, no difference to skin color, race, religion, because ultimately we're all just divine sparks in this soup. So that's one of the big things that I would do. And there would be enough to go round. It's only because of the extreme inequality that societies are struggling so much. So I'm really hoping as we move more planets into Aquarius that will happen. I do think there'll be big challenges to the financial system, partly because of this collapse of the top down. Capricorn is big business. Capricorn is big banks. Capricorn is the stock market. So if Uranus has recently gone into Taurus, 2018. If I look back, because that's an 84-year cycle, if I look back to when Uranus last went into Taurus, it was 1934. Great Depression.
Yeah.
Saturn-Pluto conjunctions, hard aspect between Saturn and Pluto between 1933 and 1935. Again, Great Depression. So if I'm looking, astrology is like meteorology or looking at economic cycles. If I'm looking at repeating cycles, it can be a very tough time for the world. In that sense, if you've got cash, a lot of cash in the banks, you've got a lot of money in the stock market. So, I'm not a financial advisor, but I would say try and have a little bit of money in gold and silver, even if it's a small amount, and don't keep that in a bank either. I can't advise on cryptocurrencies. I think they're going to be wild. I think they could be very good and also very bad, because that's Uranus. Uranus is volatility, and it's in Taurus, which is currency and the economy. So I think that's going to be a wild ride, and I just don't understand them to give anybody any advice. I think really going back to simple stuff, if you're able to grow your own food, work even with your neighbors, work with your local farmers, get an allotment, going back to the simple essentials of life will serve us very well in the coming months. So, forget all the yuppie-dum and all that excess consumerism and materialism, because that's very Capricorn as well.
Yeah.
And that's ostentatious wealth. And we're not in that age at all anymore. We're in a spiritual age, and we're in a going back to the earth and nature age.
Yeah, wow. I had this very strange meeting with my financial advisor a few months ago. When you start on this journey, and he's still living in that kind of old school way of looking at things and shares, and he's trying to say it's okay because the shares have gone down now, but it's a great time to buy more. And I was thinking, I think if you spoke to Pam Gregory or any of the astrologers right now, they'd probably tell you. So I actually said to him, would you recommend buying gold? He said, oh, no, don't be stupid. But these people are living with a very kind of low chakra, they're wonderful people, but if they don't see the big picture, then they're not going to advise in that respect, are they?
A very good guy to follow. He's a brilliant financial astrologer. It's a guy called Ray Merriman in America. He's a very good guy to follow. Also Christine Skinner in the UK. Okay. But coming up, really, we've had it this year, but not exact. Going into even February next year, we've got a square between Saturn and Uranus. That comes up repeatedly when you have stock market crashes, and that repeats through next year. So just kind of be aware that if you want to leave money in the stock market, if you've got it then, just ride it out for quite a long time. That's okay, but no, it's going to be quite a long ride before it might come up.
Okay.
We're into a whole different era now.
That is,
sorry, that advice is a little bit limited, but
no, I think it's going to help a lot of people. So if you could sit down with all the unconscious souls on the planet right now and have 10 minutes of their time, what would you tell them to prepare for in the coming years?
Wow, I would tell them to develop a spiritual practice, even if it's just watching your breath in and out of your heart as if your heart was a lung. I would tell them to live from the heart with love, compassion, and kindness as far as they were able. I would tell them to focus on being grateful for the simple things in life: food, neighbors, friends, like-minded tribe, living in a community perhaps. Going back to those real basics that you might have just taken for granted, I think are going to be a much bigger part of people's lives, certainly over the next few years. So that would be my advice. If you do know your chart as well, that's really helpful for all the reasons we've said. But even if you don't, you can still follow those principles, really. And I think cultivating tribes, whether it's online or locally, is a very positive thing to do at this time.
Okay, and so is there any particular exercise, you mentioned your heart as a lung there, that you do yourself every day that you could recommend for people to do?
Yeah, a lot of these I talk about in my videos. I mean, every day I'll meditate. I'll just close my eyes, a very simple thing. If you imagine that you're breathing in and out through your heart, it deepens and slows your breathing. If the weather is nice enough in the UK to be outside, I'm lucky enough to have a garden, bare feet on the grass, bare feet on the earth, because that just instantly sucks up negative ions from the earth, which are incredibly healing. And if you go onto groundology.com, you can see the difference in your blood and all the biomarkers literally by just having bare feet on the grass for 45 minutes. It makes a massive difference to the viscosity of your blood and your adrenal level, lots and lots of different effects. So I do that, I close my eyes, and I just imagine this white column of light streaming into my crown chakra, and I will ask for new information. New information coming in through that crown chakra, because we have, because of this cosmic and galactic energy, we have much more photonic energy. Photonic energy is high vibrational light. Light carries information. So that is pouring in for us all the time. So the more we can connect to that and just sit, feet on the grass, feet on the earth, slow your breathing, eyes shut, see a white column of light and ask for that to bring new information into you.
Wow.
And even those very simple things will help to shift you. And also I often just listen to the birds, and then I try and listen to the sound and the silence beyond the birds, and your perception starts to get finer.
Yeah, and certainly in recent weeks it's been incredible, hasn't it, just to hear those birds in the trees.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. That is fantastic advice. I shall be trying that as well. So from an astrological point of view, I mean, I don't ever like to bring politics into it too much, but are people like Donald Trump and Boris Johnson and all the other politicians around the world here to make us realize that we need to make a quantum shift in our human consciousness? Or is there another reason why they are currently leading the countries?
No, absolutely. And to avoid politics completely, because I'm not at all political, and you just get a load of hate mail as well. So whichever side you're talking about. So and I'm just not interested in politics. I'm looking at the bigger context energetically and astrologically. So if the purpose of this whole period, and this is really running till 23, 24, if the purpose of this whole period is the deconstruction of the old order, the political structure, however that's going to happen, it has to happen. And whoever was in government in either country, whether they're called Tom, Dick, Fred, Simon, doesn't matter. That was meant to happen at this time. So that kind of depersonalizes it. Okay. So actually they have quite similar charts, both of them, but they're operating in very different ways. But you could say that in both countries, quite clearly and increasingly, there is significant dysfunction in those governments. The governments are not operating perfectly in either country, whether it's because of corruption or disclosure or whatever it is, they're not operating to their best. And that is going to continually erode the authority of those governments. So that's my kind of bigger view, and that's kind of quite reassuring, because you think, okay, this is meant to be. This is the process that's meant to happen. We're tearing out the old kitchen units before we put in the new one. So we have to go through this mess, this period of dysfunction, or a tree falling in a wood, and it has to rot down completely before the new life comes up from the rotted soil, as it were, the rotted tree. We are in that very uncomfortable deconstruction. So that's how I see them both. And they are therefore playing a role that's fitting in perfectly astrologically with what's meant to be happening right now.
Yeah, and I just want to say now as well, this is not a personal attack on anyone. This is, and it really feels anyway that they are just one very, very small cog in the whole system. And a lot of politicians arrive and the politics is already set out. I mean, we all know what it's like to work for a big company, and you think you can change the world when you first arrive there. And then a year later, you're like, well, I can't seem to do anything that I actually wanted to do. So, I mean, in some ways, we could be sympathetic towards these people who get blamed for everything, but perhaps aren't necessarily driving everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And just see it as part of the process. And you say, with astrology, it's so helpful as a map, because you think, okay, that's supposed to be happening. It's not comfortable. It's not great. Supposed to be happening because we're getting to a better place as a result.
Yeah. see the beauty and the learning in every obstacle, right?
Absolutely. And we're moving from density, you know, that kind of permanent materialism, consumerism, home for life, job for life, car for life, that kind of permanent sense of ownership. I own this brick, you know, these bricks and mortar. That is going to shift significantly towards experiences, towards information, the digital age, everything being interconnected, and we being interconnected with everybody, including the galactics.
Right. Okay. Wow. Wow. So, as an astrologer, how far do you look ahead into the future? And if that's 50 years, what can we expect? Where's the Earth going to be?
Well, I don't look 50 years ahead, but actually, having said that, in general, from kind of 2023 to 2026, the outer planets, which move slowly, are moving generally from Earth signs into air and fire.
Okay.
And that means less density, that means lighter, faster. Speeds are going to be faster with information, and maybe even though personal air travel has taken a bit of a hit recently, I think we're going to travel in other ways. We may travel in a kind of AirPod. They've already been invented. It's a machine called a transition. That's a drive-fly car that you drive along the road, get to a field, and you can just ignite the, you know, the motors and take off vertically like a helicopter. So, and that would be, you know, social isolation as well. You wouldn't be traveling with anyone. So I think many things are going to change to become more airy, quicker. And so the years 23 to 26 are going to be very significant. In 2025, Neptune moves into Aries, and that could be real spiritual leadership coming to the fore. Real spiritual leaders that we so need in our world. So I see those years as really crucial to breaking through to a completely different paradigm. We're in that process right now, breaking through to a new paradigm. And then those outer planets stay in those signs for quite some time, you know, 17, 14, and 20 years respectively. So that's as far as I'm going, because I won't be around then.
Well,
so good luck to the new astrologers.
You might be around, Pam, just in another way.
Yes, probably, yeah. Another body.
And if you are, make sure you say hello, please.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, well, that sounds like an interesting 10 years anyway.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to get too personal, but you did this incredible reading for me. And you opened my eyes to a lot of things. One thing being that how important that nodal axis is to, well, to my destiny, for mine, but for anyone's destiny, if you're looking at that. Because it kind of gives us a guide of why we're here in this specific lifetime when you combine it with you know, the house that you're in and the sign that it's in. Can you just explain a little bit more about that to people who perhaps don't know about it and why it's so important?
Absolutely. And really, I wrote the book because in Indian, in Vedic astrology, it is the most important thing in the chart. That's what Vedic astrologers will talk about if you go and see a Vedic astrologer. You know, that's the dominant aspect in the chart. Whereas in the West, I mean, for about my first 30 years, nobody talked to me, nobody taught me about the nodal axis. So although astrologers are talking about it more and more now, I really wanted to write the book to dig deep into it. This operates at the soul level. Very much operates at the soul level. It's not a planet. It's not even a solid point in space. What the nodal axis is created by the orbit of the moon, because the orbit of the moon has a slightly weaving or bobbing action. And it cuts the ecliptic, which is the Earth's path around the sun. And when it's going north, that's the north node. And when it's cutting the ecliptic going south, that's the south node. And in Indian astrology, the south node is, so that they just, I mean, the word node means knot, K-N-O-T, which is this kind of electromagnetic disturbance in space. And you think, well, how can that do anything? But it does, it sets up this disturbance, which at a soul level seems to be incredibly powerful in your trajectory, not just for this life, but for many lifetimes. Right. So the south node represents the gifts and skills and abilities that you've developed in a past life or past lives that you bring in with you. And the North Node is where you've got to head to. That's your virgin territory. It's unfamiliar. You haven't done it before. You might want to keep falling back on your comfort blanket of the South Node because that's easy, you know, to do that. But we'll only get soul's growth if we head towards that North Node and carve out new territory for ourselves in a pioneering way. And that's when you start to feel really satisfied at the soul level. And when I was writing the book, I had some extraordinary experiences of past lives. I mean, I could talk for, in fact, it'd be a great movie, sort of a la Da Vinci Code. I had some amazing experiences of past lives leaking through because I had a lot of eclipses and heavy transits to my nodal axis at the time, and it was leaking through from the past, but it was leaking through in order to let go and release and resolve for this life as well as that past life. So it's so mystical, and this takes you into such deep places. So the more you can understand that North Node by sign, by house, and really identify with it, you will be living out your soul's purpose in this life. Now, many astrologers say that you've just got to head for the North Node and kind of abandon the South because you've done it to death. Yeah. And I take a bit of a different view because I think you've got to weave it into an infinity symbol. And why would you throw all that experience away? So you bring that experience into this life. And I almost saw it when I was writing the book, like this lifetime is just one stitch in the soul's tapestry of weaving those lifetimes across eternity, really. Yeah. And wow, that just blows your mind in terms of time and space. And yeah. So that the nodal axis doesn't operate at the personality level, it operates at the soul level. But that's why it's so important to really live it through, live it out.
Wow. So you recommend we all write a book and then suddenly everything will be therapeutic and everything will start coming through then of our past lives?
It certainly did with me, but even just studying it, because clearly I knew a lot about astrology when I was writing the book, but already by then, but even if you just study it, learn where it is in your chart. And I also did an accompanying video to the book. The book was, as you mentioned, How to Co-Create Using the Secret Language of the Universe. And the video series, it's only £8. It's very, very inexpensive. It's called Video Series, Video Companion Series. And that takes you on a deeper level of watching the transits to that nodal axis and seeing what's unfolding in your life. And also a fabulous thing to do, which I set up a whole forum for this at one point, that if you can look at your nodal axis and see where your loved ones, your parents, your spouse, your children, do they have planets that conjunct your nodal axis, north or south, end, doesn't matter, it's an axis, or your planets conjunct their nodal axis. These are strong signatures of a past life connection. You know, is it the moon that connects? Was your son your mother in a last life? Is your daughter Saturn on your nodal axis? Was she your father in a part? Because obviously we change sexes through life. So these, and it's quite fun to do, but this takes you into a whole matrix of exploration of, was there a past life there? Very likely. Were you lovers, Venus? Were you married, Venus? Were you siblings, Mercury, or friends, Mercury? Were you, mother, moon, Saturn, father? This really takes you on a big journey of, and it enriches your relationships enormously because you suddenly have this added dimension to, someone you love very much. And people loved it. People just loved it because it took them on such...
It's the whole dance. It's not just the tango between you and your wife, or you and your mum. That's your own universe of where you came from and where you're going, right?
Your soul group, and you've had these experiences before to get, and the dance goes on, as you say, the dance goes on. So that becomes, I think, transformational in how you see those relationships at a much deeper level. And it really enriches. If there's something, say you've got a daughter and she's always a bit bossy and authoritative, and it's actually her Saturn on your nodal axis, all of a sudden you understand that. You understand how that's leaking through and where that's coming from. So it gives you a much deeper appreciation and understanding of your relationships too. Just that just happened to fall out of writing the book, really, and making these discoveries. But it's such a, you don't need to know much astrology to do it, and the video accompanying the book will help you with that.
Every time I speak to you, you blow me away with these kind of things. And
I think it comes through me, Pete. I can't take any credit. I think it just comes through me.
Well, still, it has to come from somewhere, and it comes from you. So thank you for being the human vessel to channel this information to me and to everyone who's watching. So, I mean, you literally plotted my next 2 years when you gave me a reading, and some of it I obviously believed, and some of it I was a bit dubious about, because you said, I mean, I've lived a life where I work in sport, and every penny of I've ever earned has come from paper rounds. But once I got to the age of 16, everything's come from sport. And then you really threw me that curveball by saying, you're not going to work in sport anymore. And I said, but how is that possible? I know that's all I know. And you said spirit is going to take over, and it's going to be the whole second part of your life. And I said, okay, but where's that coming from, Pam? Where's it coming from? And I listened to the recording over and over again, and I thought, no, I just can't see it coming. And then, here we are, COVID-19. And I set up a spiritual forum called The Sacred Pause, just because I wanted to help people. And suddenly that just, blossomed into really, really helping hundreds of people from all around the planet, and giving me this, coming from the heart, this desire just to make this my life mission. I mean, how did you do that? And thank you.
No, I mean, it does seem to, honestly, as I say, I don't think I take any credit, because it so much seems to come through me in kind of goosebumpy waves. But your shift to the spiritual was so clear, and that isn't me telling you how to live your life, because it's your life to live, and I can't dictate that. But I'm a translator at that point. What I'm doing, I'm not a psychic really. What I'm doing is translating symbolism and geometry. So I'm explaining the sheet of music to you. Now, up to you whether you completely ignore every word I've said and keep the trapdoor tightly shut. No, we're going to stick with the old and the small. Or you understand better the sheet of music and start to live it more fully. And actually those opportunities are going to come into you anyway. But again, up to you with your free will, whether you take them or not. But it was a very clear shift towards the spiritual. And then you will make of that what you will, because it's not my life to live to dictate, but it can give you such a deeper understanding. Because if you hadn't known that, it might have felt, what's happening to me? Yeah. Am I unraveling in some way? I'm not the person I was, and that felt very familiar and secure. And who have I become, or who am I becoming? It's very unnerving. But if you've got the map, you think, okay, I'm actually on track, and I'll just trust this, whatever is unfolding for me.
Yeah. Well, there was no football to watch anyway, Pam. So what can I say?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're forced into doing something else.
Yeah. But no, I didn't see. I mean, this is a journey that I want to go on. But at the same time, it's always a little bit scary when you get told that your whole life is going to completely transform. And the only thing that's going to remain the same is the letter S, from sport to spirit. But I have to say, it was great to have that awareness and to see it coming, because then it meant that it felt right. And when you do, like you said, if you come from the heart, it does feel right. And I think it's only the human fear or that humanness that kind of makes us scared when we're on this journey, isn't it? And when you tap into that,
because it's so unfamiliar. But that's the way the whole world is going, really, towards that more spiritual consciousness, that greater awareness. So if at these very early stages you're already helping hundreds of people, you're going to be one of the leaders, the way showers, the light worker, one of those people out there helping everybody else in this shift. And boy, there couldn't be anything more valuable to do.
Yeah, wow. Well, no, it's an honor to be part of that journey, and I hope that's the way it comes through. Thank you so much for giving your time and for doing this interview. And even this happened on a different forum to the one that we thought it was going to happen on. So I apologize to anyone who thought they might be watching it live on YouTube. But it's been well worth it if you come back to watch it. So thank you, Pam. Before we go, I just wanted to ask you if you could give anyone advice on if they're interested in doing astrology themselves. What advice would you give? Where can they learn more, apart from obviously going on your YouTube channel?
Absolutely. If they've got either of my books, I actually list a series of teaching organizations across various geographies in the world. Really, it's just an internet search. I mean, are you able to, or do you want to attend a real class with all this social isolation we're having? And or there is an awful lot of good stuff online. So you can just look online, astrology teaching online. There's some great organizations. Depends what level you're at, but astrology university is excellent, but you've got to know a little bit of astrology to understand that. OPA, Organization of Professional Astrologers, that is excellent too. But there are lots and lots out there. And actually, if you just listen to various astrologers' YouTubes, that will teach you a lot. I've got some teaching videos that are on the product page of my website. They will explain some of the basics to you as well. And you really just find your way in your journey. And I mean, there's some excellent organizations in every country in the world. Yeah. And most of them are online now.
Yeah. Wow.
But it's a lifetime's journey. I learn something new every day, and I will never stop learning. And that's one of the reasons I love it, amongst many, many others. It's infinite. We just keep growing and learning like layers of an onion.
Wow. Well, thank you. That's wonderful advice. And for those who are watching, Pam's website is thenextstep.uk.com. Is that right, Pam?
Absolutely. Or pamgregory.com is the shortcut.
Okay, that's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know you are very busy saving lives, plotting maps, and stopping people watching football and making them meditate. But thank you, because I think you are one of those enriched souls on this planet. And I really meant it when I said your two books are books that I think will be helping generations beyond this generation. You just get that feeling when you read it. You're like, wow, this is something else. So thank you for the gift of those books, and thanks for being you, really.
Oh, wow. I'm really deeply touched by that, Peter. I really, really am. As I say, I think they both came through me, not from me. But and I think I'm touching something finer and wiser when I'm dealing with astrology. I sort of shift into a different zone. I can feel it happen. And so it's such a wonderful modality to help people, even from the very early stages.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. You've been so generous, so kind in all your praise. I'm so happy it's helped you. And the more people learn astrology, the better, because it's such a journey of self-understanding.
Aho. Thank you. Well,